Welcome to a deep dive into the mind of Ivan Pavlov.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a stack of his lectures and writings, and let me tell you, this isn't just some dry textbook stuff.
Right.
We're going to trace the evolution of his groundbreaking research on conditioned reflexes and see how he connected it to the bigger picture of
Hmm.
human behavior.
It's fascinating to see how Pavlov, who initially focused on the physiology of digestion, ended up making such profound contributions to our understanding of the brain and behavior.
Absolutely. And before we get into the nitty-gritty
Mm.
of the science, I'm really struck by Pavlov's personality that comes through in these writings.
Mm.
The guy was a fighter, completely dedicated to his research.
Yeah.
Imagine being so committed that you refuse to give newspaper interviews until you're almost 80.
He did have a way with words, didn't he? His quote about the Soviet government being an experimenter on an incomparably higher plane certainly speaks to the complexities of the time he lived in.
Right. You can tell he was a man of strong convictions, even if his views evolved over time. But speaking of experimenting, let's dive into the core of Pavlov's work.
Right.
Unconditioned and conditioned reflexes.
Okay.
I remember learning about Pavlov's dogs in school, but
Yeah.
I'm excited to go beyond the textbook version and really understand the nuances of his findings.
Well, to grasp the concept of conditioned reflexes, we have to start with the foundation: unconditioned reflexes.
Okay.
These are those inborn automatic responses we all have. Think about what happens when you smell your favorite food cooking. You start salivating involuntarily.
Right.
That's an unconditioned reflex. Pavlov meticulously studied these reflexes in dogs using things like food, bells, and even mild electric shocks.
So he was essentially mapping out these fundamental stimulus response pathways, right?
Yeah.
But then he took it a step further with those famous bells and the whole concept of conditioned reflexes.
Yeah.
That's where things start to get really interesting.
That's right. A conditioned reflex is a learned response where a previously neutral stimulus, like the sound of a bell, becomes associated with a physiological response.
Okay.
Pavlov demonstrated this by repeatedly pairing the sound of a bell with the presentation of food to a dog. Over time, the dog would start to salivate at the sound of the bell alone, even without the food.
Okay, so that's the classic example, but
Hmm.
I'm curious about how he designed his experiments to make sure he was actually observing conditioned responses
Hmm.
and not just some random fluke.
Right.
Was it really as simple as ringing a bell and giving the dog food?
Not quite. Pavlov was incredibly meticulous in his experimental design. He used carefully controlled environments to minimize extraneous stimuli. And he didn't just use any bell. He experimented with different types and intensities of sounds to ensure the dog wasn't responding to a specific tone. He also varied the timing of the bell and food presentation to determine how these factors influence the strength of the conditioned response.
That's what I love about digging into the original source material. You get a glimpse into the scientific process, the careful thought, and consideration that goes into these groundbreaking discoveries. It's not just about the end result, it's about understanding the how and the why.
And that's what makes Pavlov's work so enduring. He doesn't just observing. He was asking questions, testing hypotheses, and constantly refining his methods. It's a testament to the power of the scientific method.
Speaking of refining methods, I know Pavlov didn't stop at just bells and salivation. He went on to explore the complexities of the brain itself, specifically the role of the cerebral hemispheres. What made him focus on that particular area?
Pavlov recognized that the cerebral hemispheres, particularly in humans, play a critical role in higher-level cognitive functions like learning, memory, and decision-making. He believed they were the primary site for the formation and integration of conditioned reflexes.
So he was moving beyond simple stimulus response to really understand how the brain was orchestrating this whole process of learning and adaptation.
Exactly. He even introduced the concept of analyzers, specialized brain regions that he believed were responsible for breaking down complex stimuli from the environment. So, for example, you have visual analyzers for processing sight, auditory analyzers for sound, and so on.
It's like the brain is constantly taking in this flood of information from the world and then using these specialized regions to make sense of it all.
That's right. And through this process of analysis and interpretation, conditioned reflexes are formed, creating these intricate webs of associations that shape our behavior. It's an incredible dance between different parts of the brain, all working together to adapt to the environment.
Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding these basic concepts, I'm really curious to see where Pavlov took this research. Did he stay focused on the physiological aspects of digestion, or did he start to explore the broader implications for human behavior?
That's a great question. And what's fascinating is that Pavlov didn't shy away from tackling bigger questions about human behavior. He saw the potential of applying these principles of conditioned reflexes to understand things like neuroses, psychoses, even personality.
Wait, he was connecting his work with dogs to the complexities of the human mind.
Yeah.
That seems like a huge leap.
It was, and it's a testament to his intellectual curiosity and willingness to push boundaries. He even went so far as to intentionally induce what he called experimental neuroses in his dogs,
Hold on.
not out of cruelty, but to understand the mechanisms of breakdown and recovery in the brain.
Intentionally making dogs neurotic, I'm intrigued, but also a little uneasy about that. How did he do that ethically? And what did he learn from it?
It's definitely a sensitive topic, and we'll delve into the ethical considerations and the specifics of his methods in the next part of our deep dive. But what's important to understand is that Pavlov's goal wasn't to inflict suffering. It was to gain insights into the brain's capacity for resilience and the potential for therapeutic interventions.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. This is where those aha moments start to happen, when you see the connections between seemingly disparate areas of research.
Exactly. And what we're going to see is that Pavlov's work, while rooted in the study of animal physiology, has profound implications for understanding the human experience.
Well, I'm on the edge of my seat, ready to dive deeper into the mind of Pavlov.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll explore those experimental neuroses in more detail and see how Pavlov's work started to bridge the gap between animal behavior and the complexities of the human mind.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were about to delve into those experimental neuroses that Pavlov induced in his dogs. I have to admit, the idea of intentionally pushing a brain toward breakdown, even for scientific purposes, is a bit unsettling.
I understand your apprehension, and it's essential to acknowledge the ethical complexities involved in any animal research. While today's standards are stricter, in Pavlov's time, the understanding of animal welfare was different. However, his goal was never to inflict unnecessary suffering. He believed that understanding the mechanisms of breakdown in dogs could offer crucial insights into similar processes in humans.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm still curious about the specifics. How did he actually induce these neurotic states?
Pavlov employed a few methods, each designed to disrupt the delicate balance between excitation and inhibition in the dog's brain.
Okay.
One technique involved pushing the dogs beyond their limits of discrimination. Imagine you've conditioned a dog to salivate in response to a circle, but not an oval. Pavlov would gradually make the oval more and more circular, forcing the dog to make increasingly difficult distinctions.
So it's like creating a situation where the dog's previous learning is no longer reliable, throwing his whole system into a state of confusion and anxiety.
Precisely. This kind of prolonged mental strain, especially for dogs with certain temperaments, led to a variety of neurotic behaviors. Some dogs became highly agitated, barking excessively, pacing restlessly. Others withdrew, showing signs of apathy and depression.
It's amazing, and a little heartbreaking, how these responses mirror the ways humans react to stress and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Some people become hyperactive,
Yeah.
while others shut down. It really underscores the connection between animal models and human psychology.
Exactly. And by carefully observing how different dogs responded based on their temperaments, Pavlov started to identify patterns and develop a rudimentary classification of temperaments. He categorized dogs into 4 types: choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic, terms borrowed from ancient Greek medicine. He suggested that these temperaments influenced how susceptible a dog was to developing neuroses.
So he's essentially saying that some dogs are naturally wired to be more sensitive to stress and change, just like we see with human personalities.
Yeah.
Some people thrive under pressure, while others are more easily overwhelmed.
Precisely. And this insight was crucial because it highlighted the importance of individual differences in understanding how brains respond to challenges. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
All of this is fascinating. But knowing how to push a brain towards breakdown is one thing. Did Pavlov also explore ways to help the brain recover? To restore that balance?
He did. In fact, one of his key discoveries was the power of inhibition, the brain's ability to suppress or restrain certain responses. He viewed this as a crucial counterbalance to excitation, and he believed that a healthy brain is one that can maintain this dynamic balance.
So it's like a constant tug of war between excitement and restraint going on in our brains.
Exactly. And he found that this balance could be disrupted in several ways. He identified different types of inhibition, each with its own unique mechanisms. There's external inhibition, where a new stimulus temporarily interrupts an established conditioned response.
Hmm.
For example, if you're training a dog to salivate at the sound of a bell, and suddenly a loud noise occurs, the dog's attention might shift, and the salivation response might be temporarily suppressed.
That makes sense. It's like those everyday distractions. That
Maybe.
throws off our focus, right? What other types of inhibition did he find?
He also described internal inhibition, which develops over time when a conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without reinforcement. Imagine that you keep ringing the bell but stop giving the dog food.
Okay,
Eventually, the dog will stop salivating in response to the bell alone because the association has weakened.
that sounds a lot like extinction, where a learned behavior gradually fades away when it's no longer reinforced. But what happens when the brain is pushed too far, beyond its capacity to cope?
That's where his concept of transmarginal inhibition comes in.
Okay.
It's essentially a protective mechanism that kicks in when the brain is overwhelmed by excessive stimulation. It's like a circuit breaker shutting down to prevent a system overload.
So it's like when you're feeling completely overwhelmed and you just zone out or shut down emotionally, you just can't process any more input.
Precisely. And while this can be a temporary protective response, prolonged or chronic exposure to overwhelming stress can lead to more serious issues, even contributing to those experimental neuroses he observed in dogs.
Wow, it really highlights the importance of recognizing and managing stress,
Mhm.
both in ourselves and in our animal companions. But I'm curious, if inhibition is so crucial for maintaining a healthy brain balance, did Pavlov explore ways to strengthen this capacity?
He did. In fact, his research on a common medication called bromides led to a fascinating discovery. Bromides were widely used at the time to treat a variety of nervous conditions, but Pavlov found that their effectiveness wasn't simply due to reducing excitation.
So it wasn't just a matter of dulling everything down.
Right. He found that bromides specifically strengthened the inhibitory process, helping to restore that crucial balance between excitation and inhibition. This was a significant finding because it suggested that targeted interventions could be used to modulate specific brain functions, potentially offering a more nuanced approach to treating mental and emotional disturbances.
That's fascinating. It's like fine-tuning a complex instrument rather than just hitting the mute button. But before we get too carried away with the therapeutic potential of this research, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the ethical considerations of inducing neuroses in animals.
It's an important point, and one that deserves careful consideration. While Pavlov's work was groundbreaking, it's essential to acknowledge that our understanding of animal welfare has evolved significantly since his time. Today, researchers adhere to strict ethical guidelines to ensure the well-being of animals used in studies.
That's reassuring. But I'm also curious about the relevance of these findings to human psychology. How much can we really learn about the complexities of the human mind by studying dogs?
That's a question that continues to be debated even today. While there are certainly limitations to using animal models to understand human behavior, Pavlov's work demonstrated that fundamental principles of learning and brain function are often shared across species.
So it's like those basic building blocks of brain function. Excitation, inhibition, the formation of associations. Those mechanisms are present in many animals, including humans.
Exactly. And by studying these processes in a controlled environment, Pavlov was able to make observations and test hypotheses that would have been impossible to do with humans. His work provided a foundation for future research, inspiring generations of scientists to explore the complexities of the brain and behavior.
It's amazing to think how much of what we know about learning, memory, and even the potential for treating mental health conditions stems from those early experiments with dogs and bells. It's a testament to the interconnectedness of all living things and the power of scientific curiosity.
And it doesn't end there. Pavlov didn't limit himself to studying simple reflexes in animal models. He went on to explore something truly unique to humans: the power of language.
This is where we get to the second signaling system, right? I remember that term from our outline, but I'm eager to hear you unpack it.
Yes. The second signaling system is fascinating. It refers to the uniquely human ability to use words and symbols as signals, not just of concrete objects, but of abstract ideas, emotions, and concepts.
So that the language adds this whole other layer of complexity to the way our brains work.
Exactly. While animals might respond to the sound of a bell because it's been associated with food, humans can respond to the word bell even without ever having directly experienced a bell.
Wow.
We can imagine it, think about it, and even have emotional responses to it based on our past experiences and the stories we've been told.
That's mind-blowing. It's like language allows us to create these mental representations of the world to communicate and to think in ways that are far beyond the capabilities of other animals.
Precisely. And this is where Pavlov's work takes on a whole new dimension. He started to explore how the second signaling system, this uniquely human capacity for language, shapes our thoughts, our behavior, and even our understanding of ourselves.
This is where I really start to see the so what of all this. It's not just about dogs and bells anymore. It's about understanding what makes us human, how we learn, how we communicate, and even how we might overcome challenges like those neurotic states he observed in his dogs.
You're right. And that's what we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the implications of the second signaling system for human behavior, the therapeutic potential of Pavlov's work, and even touch upon his later research on sleep, which offered some fascinating insights into the brain's restorative processes.
Okay, now I'm even more intrigued. I can't wait to see where this deep dive takes us next. We've been exploring Ivan Pavlov's work on conditioned reflexes, from those famous dogs to the complexities of the human brain. And now we're diving into the second signaling system and how it sets us apart from other animals.
The second signaling system
Hmm.
is a game changer. It's the ability to use words and symbols as signals, not just for concrete things like a ringing bell, but for abstract concepts like freedom, justice, or even time.
So it's like language allows us to build mental models of the world that go way beyond our direct sensory experiences. But how does that impact, you know, our behavior, our emotions, our understanding of ourselves?
Think about the power of political slogans or advertising jingles. They tap into the second signaling system, evoking strong emotional responses, even though they're just words.
That's a great example. I've definitely been swayed by a catchy slogan or two in my time.
Right.
It makes you realize how much of our decision-making,
Hmm.
our beliefs, even our sense of identity is shaped by language.
Absolutely. And this opens up a whole new realm of possibilities for understanding human behavior. And those neurotic states Pavlov observed. Remember how he talked about pushing dogs beyond their limits of discrimination? Well, imagine the complexities of human discrimination, where words and labels carry so much weight.
It's like our brains are constantly bombarded with messages, both positive and negative, that shape our perceptions of ourselves and the world. And
Yeah.
depending on our individual temperaments, some of us might be more susceptible to those negative messages, leading to anxiety, self-doubt, or even those neurotic patterns Pavlov described.
Precisely. And that's where the therapeutic potential of Pavlov's work comes into play. He didn't just focus on breakdown, he was deeply interested in recovery, in how to restore balance and resilience.
You mentioned earlier that he experimented with bromides to strengthen inhibition. Are there any modern-day therapies that leverage this understanding? I mean, we can't just go around giving everyone bromides.
Well, while bromides aren't a mainstay of modern treatment, the principle of strengthening inhibition remains relevant. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for example, helps people identify and challenge negative thought patterns, essentially strengthening their ability to inhibit those automatic, often unhelpful responses.
So it's like training your brain to hit the pause button before reacting to a stressful situation or a negative thought spiral.
Exactly. And it's not just about managing negative emotions. Pavlov believed that understanding the second signaling system was key to promoting learning, creativity, and even self-awareness. He saw language as a tool for shaping not only our behavior, but also our very consciousness.
Now, that's a powerful concept. It suggests that by becoming more mindful of the language we use, both internally and externally, we can actually shape our own reality.
And that brings us to one of Pavlov's later areas of research, sleep. He viewed sleep as a form of inhibition, a crucial period of rest and restoration for the brain. He even distinguished between active sleep and passive sleep, suggesting that even during sleep, the brain is actively processing information and consolidating memories.
So it's like our brains are running a nightly maintenance program, even when we're not consciously aware of it.
Precisely. And this raises a fascinating question about whether we can consciously influence this process. Could we leverage techniques like dream journaling, visualization, or even lucid dreaming to shape the content of our dreams and potentially enhance our learning, creativity, or problem-solving abilities?
Now, that's a deep dive I'd love to explore. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today.
It seems our brains have reached their capacity for new information, at least for now.
But we hope we've sparked your curiosity and inspired you to continue exploring the incredible world of Ivan Pavlov and the brain.
Remember, every interaction, every word we utter, has a potential to influence our own internal state and that of others. It's a profound responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity.
So keep those brains engaged, those curiosity circuits firing, and never stop asking questions. Until next time.